active both with us and just a huge part of the disability advocacy community and the North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities, who passed away in the last day. So it really helps to make this event even more of a serious event, but also a tribute to the incredible advocacy that Karen Stallings did with the North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities in the state of North Carolina. This is also such a critical event because we had a really important conversation yesterday with one of our council members who is really struggling because of the direct support professional workforce shortage. And we've talked to a number of folks who are really in crisis because they don't have a Medicaid waiver. And so for us, it's really important to be able to speak with our policymakers and leaders, because what we're talking about is liberty. What we are talking about is life and death. And this is really about our community and how we can thrive and really live out the promise that we all have to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness here in North Carolina for our intellectual and developmental disability community. So we are incredibly blessed today to have Chris Hendricks leading us, our own self-advocate and leader of our council. Cheryl Powell will also be hosting today, and both of them have been real leaders within our community. But today we also have three incredible panelists. We have Representative Zach Hawkins from Durham, who has also recently joined the North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities because he is a father of two children with autism. He's a real leader at the General Assembly, working with both sides of the aisle, and also a leader on the Intellectual and Developmental Disability Caucus at the North Carolina General Assembly. So Zach, we are so excited to have you here. We also have Julia Adams-Shurick, who is really one of our ultimate leaders in policy and legislative advocacy. She is the CEO of the Oak City Government Relations, LLC, and a senior policy consultant with Kanzler Collaborative Resources. And she's the former head of government affairs for the ARC of North Carolina and has worked in the field of advocacy since 2007. She is a disabled woman who began her work in North Carolina as a self-advocate, which really began her professional passion. And then we have my very good friend from the great state of Georgia, who is the legislative advocacy director with the Georgia Council on Developmental Disabilities, Charlie Miller, who is joining us all the way from the great state of Georgia. And in that role, he works to build strong disability coalitions around key issues in that community. He also works to empower his community to advocate within the Georgia legislature. And with that, I want to just take a moment of silence for us to recognize Karen Stallings and just her incredible life in North Carolina as an advocate. Let's take a moment of silence. Thank you. And I'll now turn it over to one of Karen's good friends, Cheryl Powell.
Thank you, Tally. And Karen certainly will be missed. I'm glad everyone's here. Welcome panelists and welcome everyone. So why are we here and why are we doing this? Why is the council doing this? Well, sharing our stories can be used to build relationships. Excuse me, I've had pneumonia. With legislators, decision makers, and others. The Self-Advocate Discussion Series aims to prepare, organize, and mobilize North Carolinians who identify as individuals with disabilities, with conditions, or as self-advocates for influencing social and systems change. Welcome again, and thank you all for being here. Chris?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Cheryl. Welcome to you all. I'm so excited for this session in particular. As you know, this is the fifth self-advocacy discussion series session, and I'm here to tell you why we're here today. We are here to step into our greatness as an advocacy community. We are here to step into our greatness as individuals and learn from the extraordinary experience of our panelists who have been dedicated to advocacy and legislation for some time now. And I'm just so excited to hear from each of you. So here's how it will work, essentially. Panelists, you will be asked a series of questions, and we'll have around 3 minutes to answer the question to exemplify the elevator speech method. For you advocates here today, essentially picture yourself next to the legislature that you're trying to connect with in an elevator, and you have till the time, from the time the elevator starts to the time the elevator stops and the door opens, to share your story and advocate for the community in that period of time. And we're going to put questions in the chat box, or feel free to raise your Zoom hand to be called on if you have any questions for our panel members as we go through the designated questions. So is everybody on board with that? Everybody excited? Is it okay if I can get a little nod from everyone? Excellent. I'm seeing some wonderful positive reactions. So with that, we will get started. So we as advocates, we want to better understand about professional and personal.
Chris, you went on mute.
Can everyone hear me?
Can.
Excellent. Okay. Sorry about that. So we as advocates want to better understand professional and personal approaches to speaking with legislators. So to start, we'd like to hear from two great advocates and then from the legislature. So the first question, I'd like to start with Julia, if that's okay. Julia, what do you think are the different ways, the best ways, and the best times to reach out to and connect with legislators?
Thank you so much for the question, Chris. I think the best time to reach out and connect with legislators is before they are elected to office. We are in an election year, and it is really important that you start the communication and start the championship building as individuals are putting their name in the hat to represent you. In your city councils, in your town halls, in the North Carolina General Assembly, and in Congress, because you never know who is going to win or how your story will resonate with them. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about Representative Hawkins and my relationship with Representative Hawkins as an illustration of this. So Representative Hawkins and I go all the way back to 2004 when we worked together. And when I heard that Representative Hawkins was running for his seat, I didn't wait for him to win. I started reaching out when I knew he was going to put his name in the hat, and to reconnect with him and to talk to him about my passions and helping people with disabilities access the fullest life guaranteed to them under the law, and how we could work together at the General Assembly when he won. And that's what we need to do. We don't need to wait till they get that red button or green button. We need to get in there way earlier than that. And we also need to acknowledge that many people have disabilities. And so the disability community is large and broad and touches so many lives that our goal really is to connect with the folks who are running for office and see what their message is on this and see if this resonates with them, because it is at their kitchen table, because all of our policy starts at the kitchen table. And so that is my advice. Don't wait till they become an elected official. Connect with them as a candidate and start that process in their hometowns and their home communities and their home halls.
Thank you so much, Julia. That was perfect, and I've already learned so much in the moments that you've shared. I'm going to pass it on to the next powerhouse, Charlie Miller.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Julia is totally right. Reaching out to legislators, reaching out to candidates about their upcoming run to hopefully get the seat is so needed, because there needs to be a lot more representation on disability issues, even when you're running. Because one thing that I have learned as a good way to say, anytime you introducing yourself to to your legislator, or you're introducing yourself to someone who's a candidate for that seat, it is, hi, my name is so and so, and I vote in this election, and these issues matter to me. So anytime you're really able to kind of start that conversation early, that is fantastic. And then also, a really good time to reach out to your legislator is anytime they have an off season. So whether it is not during session, or they may be home from session for a couple days or whatever it may be, reaching out to your legislator is always a great opportunity. And we always have to remember that these legislators are community members. They're your friends. They go to the same grocery store. They go to the same churches, synagogues, and so they're always in your community.
Charlie, I love that so much. Seeing them as community, seeing these powerhouse individuals as community members elevates them and us in the same space, in the same light. I so appreciate that answer. Representative Hawkins, it's an honor to have you here, and thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
I want to throw the next question your way, if that's okay. In your view, what's the best way to approach a legislature with a topic?
Yeah, that's a good question. Luckily for people in North Carolina, we have a year-round legislature. So we have are in Raleigh and back and forth to our communities all the time. So the issues of the people of North Carolina are always on our minds. And so with that, I will have to sort of piggyback on Charlie's last statement that, while we're at home, right, we've been doing the work, we want to share what we've done or what we're attempting to do as we come home to our citizens and constituents. Find that schedule out, find out when they'll be there, and put together a town hall on a topic that really matters to you. Again, just like the one that I'm on right now. That is, I think, some of the most important stuff to do. I think, other than that, the real issues of the way that we see the work are honestly people calling our office. And when we start to get a good number of calls, a good number of emails on a particular topic, everybody starts to talk about, hey, have you gotten that email? It really is an issue, especially if those people are from our community. If someone says they're from Durham County, they get top billing. I'm paying attention to that email. And I think one of the things that is most important for people, from North Carolina to also understand is that this is the most IDD friendly General Assembly that we've ever seen, ever. You have more people in the General Assembly that have some connection to someone with a disability. And so we have to, for us in this community, as he has shared, I'm a dad of, and I'm a part of this fight. And so it's important for you to know the context in which you're dealing with this. This isn't 1950 anymore. These are people who understand it and see and are touching people and know people and family members and kids. And so I think that's important as you go into the work. And I say, lastly, bringing up a topic to us, when you do that call, when you do that email, when you do that town hall, please make sure that you provide something that's local. So if it's in Durham County, if it's in the county that you're in, that to me, the North Carolina stat means a lot because I'm there to represent the entire state. But when you boil it down to what's happening in Durham County, that means those are people that I interact with. Those are people that are possibly going to call me. That means there's a community that I need to be reactive to and responsive to. And so as self-advocates, I really want you to do that, because then you have some leverage, some power that you're bringing to that conversation. And it makes me want to say, hey, you want to get together? Let's talk about this so I can help in any way I can.
Thank you so much for that response, Representative Hawkins. What I heard, if I may attempt to interpret, is to strike while the iron's hot and, and to get to know those who represent your community, so you know exactly who to reach out to.
That's right. That's right.
And you know, speaking of the issues, the challenges that the community is facing, we would love to hear from you panelists. Essentially, what are the hot topics facing the community of persons with disabilities right now? Because there's a lot of noise, you know, in our state, in our communities, and in the General Assembly. So we want to know how we can cut right to the chase. So in your view, what are the main disability policy issues at the General Assembly right now, and who are the key decision makers, and how are those decisions made? If it would be okay, Your Honor, Representative Hawkins, please share.
Yeah. Well, the first is Medicaid expansion. If we are looking at something that can help the most people and start to fill in the gaps that are in our systems and to ensure that there's a undergirth of opportunity, that's our first thing. And that's well within our power to do. Of course, the registry of unmet need, the innovation waivers list is number 2. Julia and I have worked on this, and sort of speaking of people getting to people, she shared my story, so I don't have to reshare it, of how you need to leverage your legislator. But that issue, those 2 issues are absolutely transformative to members of our community and the disability community and disability policy. Don't let anybody tell you anything different. There are really some other really important things, but that's, I think, what the number 2 are the ones we need to focus on. And the other thing to know, just to repeat, is it's within our power. The people, of course, who have the leverage is, of course, the leadership. But because this is such a bipartisan issue, people understand it. We, and Julia knows this really well, so does Tally, is that when we pushed SB 103, the ABA therapy bill, people clamored to be a part of that work. It was not as much as a heavy lift as I thought it was going to be. And because someone had reached out and started to share stories. And then when they started to become educated and understood the math about how many people have autism in North Carolina, and how, because if you're not in Durham or Raleigh, or you're some far-flung part of the state, if you're not in a specific place, you weren't getting resources, that made everyone want to be a part of it. So first, I would say that we have people in our leadership, of course, our speaker and our committee chairs. But then we have the group of legislators that I've talked about that are very open to and very friendly as the IDD caucus. And I think those folks are people, again, we'll have a different set of people in the next session. But as that group forms, we need to make sure that we're sharing that out so that you can say, hey, I am a resource for you. I am someone here that is willing to share my story. I'm willing to talk about why Medicaid expansion and why that registry needs to be tackled. 15,000 people on that registry list. And right now, we did a good job in the budget. We moved it forward and, we got 1,000. But we need to put together a 10-year plan, as Julia well knows, of eliminating that list. And that's what we need to be focused on, because you and/or people that have been sitting on that list for more than a decade. And that's just unacceptable in North Carolina.
Thank you so much, Representative Hawkins. And Julia, you're such an advocate. You're such an active advocate in this community. What are the hot topics in your mind right now?
I was on mute. See, that's how to get me not to talk. Just tell me not to take the button off. Definitely the Registry of Unmet Needs, definitely the innovation waiver. But I also want to talk about some other things that are, so first let me back up and say, this was the strongest IDD budget that I have seen since I started the work in North Carolina. It included not only innovation waiver slots, it included a real focus on direct care workers. Because we can open up lots of innovation waiver slots, but we have to be able to recruit and retain and open up a professional pathway to people to do the work with the IDD community and our direct care workforce. That is critical. And built into this budget that I don't think we talk a lot about, and Representative Hawkins was very integral in getting this, is the first requirement for the state of North Carolina to report every year to the North Carolina Oversight Committee on how are we getting more individuals into the direct care workforce. Is it a rate issue? Is it a professional track issue? Is it an issue that we have not really looked at our underserved, historically underserved populations and really made this something that we can build into our high school curriculums as a path forward with our community college partners? Because we want more waiver slots, we want that unmet registry, but we have to, as everyone has expressed to you, if I can't find someone to work for my folks, if I can't find someone who's going to be my innovation worker, then I'm stuck again, right? So I think that was critical. And the first report is March 1st. And then for every year, for 5 years, they're going to have to do this report. That is a massive amount of data, and that's really going to direct how we move forward, fits into that 10-year plan. I also want to talk about something that the General Assembly and the Department of Health and Human Services are doing jointly, and that's creating what we call 1915I waivers. So what is that? That will be the first entitlement that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities will have as a service for them in the state of North Carolina. And again, this is another tool we are working on to address the registry of unmet needs. And as influencers, as advocates, it's really important that when the state of North Carolina, the Department of Health and Human Services says that they're asking for public input on these new waivers that they're creating, that you and your family members get engaged in that process also, because we take that information. Representative Hawkins can tell you, I take that feedback that I see in those meetings back to Representative Hawkins and also to the rest of the IDD caucus, and I let them know what's going on out in the community. This is another way you shape policy. You influence the policy by telling your story. I also want to say that on the education side, for the first time in a long time, we actually cracked a glass ceiling in North Carolina by being able to start to fund community college programs in a different way for the IDD community. And that is really critical too, right? Getting to that post-secondary bubble, getting past all of the questions about how do we get into these programs like Beyond Academics and programs at Western Carolina. The funding to those programs wasn't available to our community, and we are making inroads now to make that happen. That was also in the budget. And the last piece I want to talk about on Medicaid expansion. Does Medicaid expansion open up new waiver slots? No. But you know what Medicaid expansion does allow us to do? It allows us to draw down more funding from the federal government into the big Medicaid pot that we can then redistribute to serve the needs of the IDD community. So really incredible and important work. And you all, there is going to be an oversight committee starting. It is only right now about Medicaid and Medicaid expansion. And again, if you want to be an influencer, get on those calls. You can stream them live, hear what your elected officials are saying, and then provide them feedback by emailing them, by calling their office. And unlike Washington, D.C., I still am old-fashioned enough, that's why I got this gray hair, to say sometimes it's great if you can do a handwritten note about why it's concerned to you, or type something out and mail it, because I still think that has meaning and message when someone receives that in their office. So that's what I would say, are some of the other things that are really boiling up. I also want to say that on the federal side, we have a piece of federal legislation that you too can influence, the Build Back Better plan by the Biden administration, that will give a surge of new money to home and community-based supports, recognizes the need for direct care workers. So our local elected officials do interact with their congressional counterparts and do deliver those messages for you to their congressional counterparts. So don't forget that part in it.
Thank you so much, Julia. We are actually a little bit ahead of schedule, and I think it's partially due to my nerves, so maybe that's a good thing. But I want to do a little bit of a deeper dive into that question because you shared a lot. So I'm going to try and simplify this, but really, when it comes to decisions, how are they made? I think that if we can understand really how the process that decision making goes through, we can better advocate for ourselves. And I would just love your perspective on that.
Sure. And Representative Hawkins, jump in any point here. And Charlie, please. And so the first thing that I always say when I was a self-advocate, and I still am a self-advocate. I'm a woman with a disability. I have a genetic condition. And for those of you who are wondering why I'm on a little bit of a delay, I'm also hard of hearing. And so I'm using our ASL interpreter to make sure that I'm getting all the information and all the questions clearly. So when I started out as a self-advocate, what was really important to me was two things. One, who do I need to speak with, right? So obviously for Health and Human Services, I want to engage those people who are on those committees at the legislature. Who is the health chair? Who are the health chair members, right? The health committee members. And I want to make sure everyone understands, we don't just do health chairs when we talk to folks, we also talk to the members of the committee. So a committee might have 15 people on it. Get to know the 15, because Representative Hawkins may be one of the chairs someday, but right now he's a member. So we start working with him as a member, and when he becomes a chair, he takes all that knowledge with him into that chair position. I think that's really important. I do think it's important to be very specific about what you're asking for. If you're asking for innovation waiver slots, ask for innovation waiver slots and tell why those slots are important to you. Personalize the ask, right? And make it so that elected official can do follow-up questions, but also can reach out to those of us who are in the building all the day to get some of the funding streams, because that's more technical in nature, the federal money versus the state money versus all of the increases from the Biden administration and previously the Trump administration. I also think it's really important to do follow-up, right? One time in the office and out doesn't build a relationship. Talking and going back and talking again and going back and talking again. But I found as a self-advocate, for me, the best thing to do was to pick one topic I was really passionate about. So at the time, it was dealing with making American Sign Language a foreign language credit for completion of your 4-year high school degree. And so I talked about how difficult it was for me to learn foreign languages because I have an unusual hearing loss. And I stuck to that topic. And I found a woman who was a great champion for it, Representative Laura Wiley, and we worked together and we moved the bill through the General Assembly and it became a law. Does that answer kind of where you were going, Chris?
It does. And you shared so much. I don't hesitate to ask, but I wonder, Representative Hawkins, do you have anything to add? I know that was
yeah. I mean, she is as thorough as they come, and one of the best advocates in the building. And the place where I'll pick up is exactly when she said that you have to get to know the committee members, because as we will know, an idea becomes a bill, right? And the way that idea becomes a bill is because you come to your legislator and you talk to them about said issue that you need to solve and how it impacts not only you, but a series of people that exist in their community.
Recording in progress.
Sorry about that.
We all good?
Yeah, we're all good. My computer just said it was going to restart, and so I wanted to make sure that I didn't get cut off here. Can you still hear me?
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. So when you have the opportunity to understand that you influence that legislator by giving that personal story, talking about the stats in the community, talking about ways that people's lives can be improved, through that process. When you do that, said legislator will say, all right, well, I'll check and see what kind of traction I can get in this, or I'll just file the bill. That bill then gets assigned, right? You'll hear a thing called first reading. So first reading is when the bill is introduced to the General Assembly and receives its assignment. Now, if you're working with a person like Julia and you learn the process, you can come, and Julia has actually worked with me on this in my first term. She said, hey, when you're filing a bill, see if you can get them to assign it to these committees, because these are the ones that are most appropriate. Not to say it's always going to happen, but if you understand the potential path for a bill, you then start to do the process, what as they call mapping. You start to say, all right, well, I know that these 15 people are on the committee. I want to get to know them. I want to make sure that we share our stories ad nauseum with them, right? Because by doing that, everyone on the committee is then more educated. And so when discussion comes up and when they're preparing, they have a resource like Julia or yourself to follow up on. So when there's discussion in the committee, then that person or that bill, right, can get a favorable report. Then it goes on to another committee. And again, you sort of run the same play. You find out sort of who the chairs of that committee is, you find out who the members are, and you work your best to educate them, and also make sure that the person who's carrying the bill, the legislator who has filed the bill and moving it around, you want to ensure that that person has all the resources and stats that they need. Because if they can go in and represent you and that bill well in that committee, they're going to get a favorable report. And because what they're thinking about, and it's a pure numbers game, they're thinking when they go into a committee, how many votes do I need to get a majority of these members to say aye, right? To say yes. And you can be an integral part in that, especially if, again, you're contacting them, especially if you know if they're in your community, if you have just sort of done the work to make sure that you're communicating with them, like that makes a difference. And that's really how things get through the General Assembly. And the last thing that I'll sort of harp on is one thing that you will find as you're going through it is what the obstacles are. And as self-advocates, I think that that's one of the questions to ask. It's like, or if you know it already, that's great. Well, who else is interested in this bill so you can build a coalition, or who is against this bill so you can sort of figure out how to maneuver. But I think that that's the only thing that I would add to, a little bit more detail about sort of how you go course by course. And I mean by committee by committee, because that's just really important for you to know if you're going to be a part of this. And most people that are not, in the advocacy community truly don't understand how much you can influence that process. And that's what I'll leave you on. Again, hit yourself to people like Julia who know it. They know everybody in the building. But two, follow their lead and do what they ask when they say go, right? Like when they say call someone, when they say do this, when they say make sure you're making yourself known and your issue known, do that. Because if we don't hear from you, the less educated we are about said issue and the less likely we are to help moving forward because we don't understand it, if that makes sense.
The only thing I would add is make sure your coalition is bipartisan. So disability is a bipartisan issue, and we have we are only one of 3 states that have an IDD caucus that I know of at this time. And when we created the IDD caucus, and Representative Hawkins is one of our leaders, we specifically made it so that it was bipartisan, bicameral. You have
Right.
senators from both parties, you have representatives from both parties, and you have them all over what I call the political spectrum, right? We have folks who are very considered liberal, we have folks who are considered very conservative, but you know what they are all focused on right now is how do we best serve people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in the state of North Carolina? And because we were able to create that caucus, all of the bills you enter into the General Assembly, you can now easily find a Democrat and a Republican who will take that top tier with you. And this way, you're not only just working it through all the committees like Representative Hawkins so beautifully illustrated, you're also working it in the only room I cannot get into, which is the caucus of the Democratic Party, the Republican Party. Can't get in that room. I'm not elected. I'm not running for office either. So, but because I have a Republican on the bill and a Democrat on the bill, they can get into their caucuses and they can act as your voice behind those doors to answer members' questions and to do the vote count. And that's a really critical part that it took me a while to learn. But that is really super important to know that, you know, that's why you build these champions, because there are rooms we just can't go in.
Yeah, no. I'll echo that, because every caucus, and thank you for bringing that up, is every caucus goes through the list of bills that are coming up potentially that week. And what they do generally is they have somebody on the committee who's assigned to know the bill so they can explain it. And to exactly her point, it is so helpful for not only everyone on that committee to know, but if they can stand up and vouch for it and say that this is a bill that we need to support as a caucus, it really makes a difference. And again, you never know when they start to do that work, who else cares, right? And so that's why it's just so important to educate, because you are not alone in any of this. And so many legislators, especially now in the age of information, are so much more understanding and knowledgeable about what is happening in the world, and have someone in their family or in their circles that understands disability. And most importantly, I'll leave on this, is especially for all of my friends, but those on the opposing side, the opposite party of mine, they understand economics, and that in my version of a better North Carolina, you should be able to maximize your given potential, right? Whatever that potential is in the great state of North Carolina. And that means people going to work, people having the ability to have access to the things that they need to help them succeed at whatever level they have. And that means these are more people in our workforce. These are more people that are owning homes and doing the things that help make North Carolina a great state. And I think that sort of last piece of it cannot be disputed either, that what you bring in terms of those sort of workforce and entrepreneurial and tax-paying citizens, right? All those things taken together really matter. And it's worth to legislators who then divvy out your tax dollars. It is so important to say that if you do these things, it helps us do this, right? And you have a direct control on how that happens and how quickly people in my community can move forward. So I'll leave you with that. I think that's an important piece, and it speaks the language of a lot of legislators.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Representative Hawkins. And with that said, I just want to share, we're going to try our best to get to, I see some questions in the chat, and we're going to do our best towards the end to get to as many as we can. But Charlie, I know that you've been waiting in the wings and chomping at the bit to share. You're one of the best storytellers that I've come to know in a short period of time. And as an advocate and great storyteller, what do you think is the best way to share your story with the legislator in order to create change, make a difference?
Yeah, thank you. I believe that we all have an opportunity to make a difference in the disability community. excuse me. And I really believe that the disability community, us, and I am a person with a physical disability, we are one of the best people to educate lawmakers and policymakers on these issues, because we live it every single day. Every day in my life, I wake up and I want to make sure, one, I have accessible transportation. My friends have direct support professionals that are able to help them. And then also, we want to make sure that our legislators know about these issues. And one thing that I have came to learn very early on is when I'm speaking to a legislator as Charlie Miller, as the Georgia Council of Developmental Disabilities, it does make an impact. But the biggest impact is someone in their local area reaching out and talking to the legislators. As I like to put it, I could talk to a legislator until I'm blue in the face. And y'all, I can talk to a brick wall if I had to. But if a person with a disability from their area reaches out and says, hello, Representative Hawkins, I have this issue. This issue is blah, 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 blah. Like he said, that's going to go to the top of his mind and trigger him to say, these people are voting for me, and they're reaching out to me to be their advocate. So they have an opportunity to really make a big difference in the legislator. And one phrase that Georgia Council of Developmental Disabilities has is disability policy is an all policy. So it doesn't have to be specific to disability issues. Every little policy is going to be touching the disability community. And that's why we need to make sure that advocates not only understand the meat and potatoes of the disability issues, but also things that we may not think are touching the disability community. Like in Georgia, we have a bill going through that is going to be changing, that is going to be allowing students, regular ed students, to go to private schools, and also people with disabilities to go to private schools. That's a really good opportunity, but we also want to make sure the legislators know, hey, when they go to private schools, federal legislation may not come with them. So the Section 504, the ADA, the IDEA, we need to make sure that the legislators understand, if we're going to have this bill, we need to make sure that we're going to have the safeguards in place for people with disabilities to truly be able to be in the educational system.
So well put, so passionately put, Charlie. Thank you so much. And with that said, I know it's sort of been touched on before, but Representative Hawkins, do you have anything to add in terms of the best way to actually get in touch with legislatures?
Yeah, good question. First is calling their office. Every legislator has what they call a legislative assistant, and they are sort of tasked with working with the advocates and the members of one's community to hear their concerns and make sure they get to the legislator. And then, of course, they will also work through their emails. And if there's a request for a meeting, they'll work with the schedules to get that done, right? And so, like both of them have said, let them know you're from your community, let them know the topics that you want to hit. And then, most times you're going to have, 15 to 20 minutes with that legislator on the phone or especially in person. So I think that's just important. And then Charlie, he killed it at the beginning. When they're home in the off season, there's not an off season in North Carolina, but when they're home, make sure to ask and find out when it is and say, hey, would love to have a virtual town hall or in-person town hall with you so that we can educate you and then find out where you are on issues so that we can work together to solve these things.
Thank you so much, Representative Hawkins. Thank you all. Panelists has been so engaging, and there's just so much passion in this room. I so appreciate it. We so appreciate it as a council. As a final question to each of you, we would just love to know if you have anything to add in terms of what it takes to build these relationships with legislatures and do what we need to do as advocates to make sure that that we're heard. So I'd like to start with Julia. Julia, do you have anything to add?
Sure. So first of all, be honest, right? So if you don't know an answer to a legislator's question, say you don't know. It does two things. One, it builds a strong bond of you're not going to just say something because you're saying it. And it gives you an opportunity, more importantly, to go back and give the legislator the answer. Recognize that the disability community is broad and wide, and that we have many people in many different places within the community. So when I started out in 1996, I am old. When I started out in 1996, the first thing that I had to do was accept that I was disabled. I was born with my disability, folks, and I didn't actually claim my disability as an identity until 1996. I was 30 years old when I finally said, I am disabled, and I now need to fight for my right to fully exist in my communities. And I think it's important that we understand that as we talk about building advocacy within this community, we are all at different points on this journey. Some of us came kind of late, 30 years into this game. And so we need to understand that and recognize that and give that a power of its own. It was not easy for some of us to become disabled as an identity because of the time that we were raised in, right? I mean, I was born in 1996. We didn't have IDEA. We didn't have anything. The movement was very new and was just coming along, and we weren't there yet. And I think that is important to acknowledge when we're talking about getting out in front of issues. And then the last thing I would leave is that I agree with Charlie. Charlie, all issues are disability issues. All issues are disability issues. And the strides that we've made around access help everybody. You know, we always talk about that ramp story. The first ones of us who fought for that curb cut, if you've ever had to push a child, and we made it for wheelchairs, but believe me, a lot of people use that same curb cut to get the baby in the stroller into the store. And so that's a really super simplistic example of how all policy is disability policy and how it affects the greater communities. I think the last thing I would say is it's a marathon, not a sprint. Building the relationships take time. Moving policy sometimes takes time. Building institutional knowledge takes time. And so engaging all of the time can be exhausting. So take some self-care for yourselves, advocates. It's necessary, but also know that you are making a change. And this budget that you saw come out with the funding for the slots, for the funding for direct care workers, that wasn't a thing that just happened. That's 10 years of a lot of your work. And so also acknowledge that you made this impact with legislators and take that moment to really recognize your contributions to the changes we're seeing now in North Carolina.
Thank you so much, Julia. And Charlie, do you have anything to add as such an experienced advocate?
Yes, I definitely do. And y'all, I'm going to apologize now. I am I am the son of a used car salesman. So I have a story about that. So I always think about reaching out to your legislators. It's kind of like, and please, I hope I don't offend you, Representative, but it's kind of like having a mechanic. And when you have your vehicle or your wheelchair, my instance, or whatever it may be, you want to make sure you keep in touch with your mechanic. You want to make sure you have that relationship with your mechanic, because Lord knows if you break down at 2 a.m. on the side of the street and you call somebody, say a random mechanic that you don't have a relationship with, they may not come out and help you, honestly. But if you build a good relationship and a good foundation, and you call with an issue and say, Representative, I am broken down with this issue in the disability community, and I need your help. It may not be at 2 a.m. For the legislative issue, but by golly, they will make sure to help you. And they will make sure to really say, hey, that's my friend Charlie. I got to figure out how I'm going to help my friend Charlie out in the disability community. So y'all make those relationships and keep those friendships alive. One of the best things that I kind of think about when you're reaching out to a legislator or just reaching out to your representative or senator, you don't always got to reach out to them with an issue. Sometimes reaching out to them with just positive things that are happening in your life, like an update in your life, that they love to hear that stuff too. Because building a friendship is going to go so long and really, really help your issues in the future.
I love that so much, Charlie. Positivity is such a centerpiece for the self-advocacy discussion series. So thank you so much for that. And Laura, you have been waiting so patiently, along with a couple others that have questions. But if we've got time, I'd like to start with Laura's question for the panelists today. Laura, would you like to share, or would you like me to read from the chat?
Oh, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Well, I would like to, I think it's great that they're going to raise the pay of the DSPs. I work in Reach, and, they were limited how much they could pay their staff, and they really need to pay them more to keep them doing what they're doing, because good help is hard to find. And the thing I put in the chat was about housing, that I would like to see more affordable and accessible housing, because I know, we had to move from our condo, which was not real accessible, but it was affordable. When my husband became physically disabled in last year with infection in his feet, and now we're having to pay so much more in rent, paying the mortgage, but it's supposed to have been accessible, but it's not. We're trying to find another place to move to, but housing is so expensive, and I have a job, but I'm limited because my husband's not bringing us much money, because he's just on short-term disability and he's waiting to get approved for disability. So he's not bringing in as much money, but we're having to pay out more rent. And in we have like a non-ramp in front of our building. They try to make it look kind of like a ramp, but it's not. And last month he fell backwards off his wheelchair. And so it's just trying to get in the building. He could have got seriously hurt. But housing costs is just so high. And, I am just trying to, find the best solution for us right now. We're stuck until August, but I really want us to be able to move somewhere that's more accessible for him and affordable. And so I didn't know, about who to advocate for about that. But I also want to show you my book of people's stories of disabilities that came out last month, called Hope is on the Horizon. I'd like for all the legislators and all of y'all, all the agencies to have one of these books. It's a book of stories and people with disabilities. And I would just, these people, some of them didn't learn a lot in school because they were born, before the ADA, and now some of them are going back to college because they didn't learn to read when they're 6 and now they're 60.
So Laura, this is Tally. Thank you.
Yes.
And that let's talk about how we at the council can support you to get your book out to some folks. And let's see, since we just have basically 1 minute left, I'd love for Representative Hawkins, if you wanted to just give us your thoughts about sort of how to approach you on an issue like housing, and then just any final thoughts you have. We're just so grateful, and I'm going to let Chris finish this off in a second, but just thank you so much, Laura.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think, first is, of course, contact your legislator. And one of the things that we have found, and that's one of the issues that we fought for, is that looking at the way that we give tax credits in the state of North Carolina to communities controls a lot of how affordable housing is built. We have that same issue in Durham. We try to make sure that we're doing it, but if we're only getting what they call this is the detail, but like a small number of 4% tax credit, that doesn't incentivize developers to build the type of affordable housing, the type of size and scale that we need it. And so we're really trying to push with sort of the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency to get more of those done in communities, because to the point of one of our panelists, all issues are, people think housing policy and affordable housing, and they think a certain demographic. They don't understand that it also helps people in disabled communities. But and then of course we then will work with our local city council and town councils, because they have a large role in their city's affordable housing policy, and sort of how a lot of that moves forward, because they play a larger role than the state, and a more often role. But I think that when you reach out to your legislator, you then sort of find out who represents you on city council, so that they can be too. But just an ending, I love the mechanic story. I'm smart enough to know that's just a hard act to follow. But the piece about that story that's so important to remember is building the relationship, is making sure that the person will call you back or knows who you are. But the most important part of that story is that person knows your story. They know you. So when you're in trouble or when you need help, they understand the history of your car. They understand the history of what the relationship is. And if you're an honest broker, if you're someone that they see as a resource, if you're someone who has been giving them incredible, feedback and information about how to solve the issue, or the issue that you care about, there's a relationship there that when it is time to act, that person is then in your favor. And he nailed it with making sure that you take the time to build it. Sometimes it's just an update, because guess what? We share things that are happening in our communities with our other legislators, right? So if I know that someone has done something well, if I know that someone has overcome something, if I know that because of the policy that got pushed forward, that they were helped and that others were helped, and they share that with me, then that helps to build a relationship. And so I think it is just so important to know that everything that you do and all the times that you're able to raise your voice, they matter. They matter because other people who can't do it need it. And that's sort of what drives me to talk about this work and to be as open and as supportive, is because my voice in raising it helps a lot of folks who will never get a chance to talk in these halls. And so your job is to make sure you're raising your voice so that people like me have all the ammunition I need inside that building to make a difference. And so today's the first, in the series of us getting there, but I look forward to the journey. We will get there, and I know that because of the work this council is doing and all these self-advocates that are doing, that we're going to make big strides for a lot of people in North Carolina and really make it the place that it deserves to be. So I'm just honored to be here. Thank you, Tally. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Chris. And I'll yield the floor.
Thank you, Representative Hawkins. Thank you to all of your panelists, all the panelists, to reiterate a bit of what you shared. And thank you for reminding us as advocates that we matter and that our stories matter. And this has just been so impactful. I hope all of you got as much out of it as I did. I don't even know what to do with all the information except for strike while the iron's hot, which is now. Let's do what we can to remind ourselves that we do indeed matter, and let those words of Representative Hawkins resonate in our minds and hearts as we move forward. So thank you all so much, and I'll pass it back to
yeah, Chris, this is Tally. I'll just jump in since we're down to the 3 minutes over. But y'all, this was so much great information, and I'm actually proud that we're only 3 minutes over with such a incredible panel. Charlie, thank you for traveling all the way from Georgia to be with us on the Zoom. And Julia and Zach, we are so grateful for your advocacy here in North Carolina. I think we all have a new metaphor with Charlie's mechanic. So get to know your mechanic. Those of you who use wheelchairs know how critically important that is, or power chairs. And those of you who have vehicles or are involved with vehicles, it is really about, as I started off, this really is about our lives. This is about our independence. This is about our community. And it's also about relationships and having a relationship. And you might have a legislator you don't always agree with. Frankly, some of those are the ones that we want better relationships with more than anyone. So, if you live and, wherever you live, it really makes a difference to all of us, not just yourself, that you're building a relationship with your legislator. As I put in the chat, Jill Hinton is our extraordinary policy leader at the council on and does our monthly updates. I've spoken to a legislator just in the last week who said they read it every month to understand what's going on in their job. So that's fantastic. And just so appreciative to each and every one of you. As Zach said, I think we want to make this a regular occurrence. We've already started talking about something fun to do with the self-advocacy discussion series next, but we're going to keep doing it. Our goal is our sort of first goal is to have 50 self-advocates really know their legislators. I think our next goal will be to have somebody in every single district know their legislator well. And so we're going to keep doing that. Pam, do you have something for the good of the order?
You have something for the good of the order, Tally. Thank you. In just a moment, our spotlights will be removed because one word I heard each of our panel members, as well as Chris, say is community. And Zoom is very different than being in person. But when the spotlights are removed, if you want to turn your cameras on, we can all see each other as we head out when Tally closes us, and we can enjoy a greater sense of community knowing who was among us. So thank you, Tally. That's all. Go ahead.
Fantastic. Well, let's do it. And again, thank you to each of you. Charlie, we'll get you up to North Carolina next time so we can do something in person once we get rid of this pandemic. Hopefully y'all don't have one in Georgia. All right. Well, thank you to each of you.
Thank you.
And if you can't wait, you can also just go to the gallery view in your upper right and just see everybody who's on. But yeah, it's great to see each of you. We had 55 folks join today. So thank you
so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Cheryl. Thank you for all your leadership, Cheryl Powell.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Just get back with me about how to make my book. So,
Have a great
All
one.
right. You're doing a good job too, Laura. All right.
thank
Bye,
you.
y'all.
All right.